Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. Thank you for tuning into the show. And if you hear something that tickles your ears or really hits you hard, do us a favor and share with your friends. Put it on social media. And when you do, tag us at His and Her Money. You show us love, we'll show you love right back. Thank you for that in advance. I'm excited about today's episode because we're talking about real estate. Man, it's only so many ways, so many vehicles that you can use to build wealth, and real estate is at the top of the list. And we have one of our favorite real estate experts waiting in the wings to share with us some insight. His name is Chad Carson. They call him Coach Carson in the internet streets, and he's been helping people a lot get into the game of real estate investing. And now he is about to help you. So if you've been thinking about it, you've been wondering about it, you're trying to learn how to make it happen for yourself, get your pen and paper ready, because you're about to get a bunch of nuggets that are going to come your way that you are going to want to remember. So let me go get Chad and we can start this conversation and we can all start building this wealth together. Hey, Chad, welcome back to the His and Her Money Show.
Tala, it is great to be here. Thank you for having me back.
We're glad that you're back, and a lot's been going on since the last time you were here. It's been a couple of years, and you done been overseas living, took your family, and just left us, and then you came back. Talk to us, man. What's been going on with Coach Carson?
Yeah, well, I have to say, this is like fast forward 20 years after I started real estate, but we moved to another country and lived there just because. It's because my wife's a Spanish teacher, so like when we met, like many years ago, our first date, we talked about living abroad in Latin America. We just love speaking Spanish. We've lived in Ecuador. We lived in Spain this time, in Granada, Spain. And our kids were 10 and 12 when we left. And we're like, they're kind of getting up in age. They're getting towards high school. If we want to do this, we're going to have to do it pretty soon. And so, yeah, we just picked up our lives and moved over there, and we're expats for a year. But now we're back in the United States in Clemson, South Carolina, where we live kind of permanently.
All right. Now you're known as Coach Carson because you had a stellar college football career, and since then you've had a stellar career as a real estate investor. Talk to us from your perspective why real estate is such a powerful tool for wealth building for the average person.
Yeah, there's a couple main reasons. And I think back when I first started, I got out of college and had $1,000 in the bank. And so one of the first reasons is like, how do you start building wealth when you don't have a whole lot of capital, a whole lot of money to put? We've all been there, unless you had, a trust fund land in your lap, which is not normal. Like most people have to scrape by and don't have a lot of cash. And so real estate is one of these vehicles where you can get into it with less money down, not always no money down, but you can get into it with less money down. And there's a lot of different financing programs out there, especially if you're willing to move into the property maybe and do like an owner occupied type situation where you live in the house for a period of time. Maybe you buy a duplex and you rent out one side and can make some cash flow. That's called a house hack. Or maybe you just live in a simple house, live there for a couple of years, and then instead of selling it, keeping that house. And so all of those are they're just real approachable. It's like the money is more approachable. And I also like Warren Buffett's advice. He always talks about how you want to invest in things you understand. Like if you don't understand it, if you don't understand what crypto is, you don't understand what this stuff is, like that's kind of complicated. That's hard to understand. I don't understand it all. But a house, like we've all lived in an apartment, we've lived in a house. And so we understand, like, is this a good street to invest in? Is this a good place for people to live? Is this a good neighborhood? Does this have a potential over the long run? Like most of us can intuitively sort of understand the value of real estate. And so when you combine that, like the ease of a little easier to get into with just this kind of an intuitive investment, I think those are like the foundational pieces that make it for like the regular person, for the small and mighty investor, like it just makes it a better place to start.
You talk about real estate in a great way. And some people are probably like, if you watch the stuff on TV or whatever, I'm not handy because I'm in that Chad. I'm in that camp.
Me neither.
I don't know how to fix nothing, bro. So like if somebody's apprehensive, like, man, that's not, I want to build wealth. I think real estate is a great tool, but I don't know nothing about houses or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm not either. So I'm in the same camp. There are definitely people who invest in real estate who do fix stuff, and that's great. Like they can save a little bit of money. They can do that. But for me, I've always had to write a check to somebody else. And so the main thing you got to understand is how to run the numbers. You got to understand, like, okay, if I'm going to buy this property, there's going to be this much rent coming in every month. And you got to be able to do, it's not complicated math. It's just a subtraction basically. But you got to know if I start with $1,500 in rent, I've got to pay my taxes. I got to pay my insurance. I got to pay my mortgage payment, and I got to be able to pay the plumber, and I got to pay other people to fix stuff for me. And if you can do that up front, if you can run the numbers up front, then you'll be able to afford to pay somebody to do this stuff for you. And that's really nice because ultimately, like the main goal, like when you first start, you might have to do some stuff yourself, but long run, the goal is more relatively passive income. It's never 100% passive, but like when I was in Spain for a year, this is 20 years after I started, but I wasn't fixing toilets. I wasn't going and doing stuff. Like if something happened, I had a property manager who took the call from the tenant. They turned around quickly, called the plumber. They took care of it. And what did I get? I got a bill. Like they actually paid it for me. They took it out of the rent. And then at the end of the month, I got what's left over after all the bills have been paid. And so that's the key. Is like it's kind of a math thing, but it's not complicated math. But if you can figure that out, if you can figure out how to run some basic numbers, then and buy the right properties, then you can then not have to be handy. Like you do need to learn some terminology and some vocabulary, but I don't know how to swing a hammer, do all that stuff. Like that's just not my thing.
Your new book is called Small and Mighty Investor. Talk to me about why you called it that.
Yeah, it's two things. One is when I first started, the only thing I heard when I went to seminars, when I went to classes, it was like successful investors are the ones who are the biggest and who grow the fastest. And it hadn't changed much. Like today, if you look on the internet, it's like, hey, you got to 10x, you got to go big, you got to be the most successful investor. And there's something kind of appealing about that to me. Like when I first started as a young investor, I played sports, I played football. Like I like to go for it. Like I like to set big goals. The problem is though, is they kind of sell this dream as if you got to have 1,000 units or 100 units to be successful. And all behind the scenes, though, there's a lot of risk to doing that. There's a lot of complication and there's a lot of things that you have to do and a lot of time you have to spend doing that. When in reality, you could have a goal to have like 5 properties and you could keep it simple. And you could maybe pay those properties off, pay all the debt off on those properties. And you know what? If those properties paid you $7,000-8,000 a month, like you could have 5 properties and live really, really well and have a very simple part-time job with real estate investing. And literally, like I spend a couple hours per week at most on managing the manager, managing the properties. And I have a lot more than 5. So that's why I wrote the book, The Small and Mighty Investors. It's kind of like pushing back against that, saying, no. Like most of us out there, we don't need 100 properties. We don't need 1,000 properties. We just need a simple step-by-step process to have enough. And then once you have enough, you can do whatever matters to you. If you're a preacher who needs to be preaching, right? That's what I like to say. You need to have time to do that. You need to have time to be a parent. You need to have time to be a teacher, maybe who doesn't make enough money. Like that's where my heart is like the people who have that they have those missions in life. And real estate money is great, but it's not the main thing. It's just like the vehicle, it's the tool. And so let's figure that tool out. Let's do it really well, and let's get to that thing that matters to them, and let money take care of itself.
Now, you started your investing career right before a recession. Like in 2007 is when you kind of got in the game, and you've been going, if I remember that correctly, and you went through that and survived that. Now, at least at the time of this recording, we're not in a recession, but there's some like economic things that are going on that are kind of unprecedented, like the level of the interest rates right now and even housing prices. Is this a good time still to be invested in real estate?
Yeah, I invested in the wrong time early on, and yet it still worked out, right? And here's why. Like I invested in 2003, 2004. That's when I started. I bought a bunch of properties in 2007, like exactly the wrong time when you're not, when on paper, you're not supposed to do it, right? But here's the thing. Like I did 2 things. One is I thought long term. So like, even though the properties went down by 10%, 20%, if you think long-term, you're buying this property so that it works over a 7-year period, a 10-year period, a 15-year period. And when you have that long-term mentality, you can weather the storm. It's kind of like a house. Like I don't live in a hurricane alley, but like if you're in a hurricane alley in Florida or something, you better have a house with some shutters and some plans. Like you better build it well, because otherwise you're gonna have some problems. And it's the same way when you buy real estate. Like real estate's a great long-term investment. It's gonna go up and down, but if you buy today, you just need to buy so that you don't try to make money in the next 2-3 years. You need to make money over the next 5, 10, 15 years, and you do that by buying, number one, in a good location. So you got to really think about your location and say, is this neighborhood going to be better 10 years from now than it is today? So you're sort of making a bet on a location with real estate. You really are. That's why I said earlier it's kind of intuitive. Like if this is a place you would live and you feel like, hey, I want to help folks in this neighborhood. I want to rent to people who are good people who will be here for a long time. Like you're basically betting on that neighborhood and saying, I believe in it. And if you believe in it, number one, and then number two, get financing that allows you to hold over the long run. So real estate's great if you can get a 30-year loan, 30-year fixed financing. That's amazing because that interest rate's not going to go up and down when you fix it. And yes, today those are higher interest rates, 7.5%, 8%. So it's a little bit more difficult to make work. So what a lot of investors are doing right now is being a little bit more creative. They might have to get a partner to help them put more money down on a property. They might use what's called seller financing. That was a big part of my journey, is that I didn't have I couldn't go get a bank loan when I got out of college. So I had to go to sellers and talk to landlords who were retiring and saying, hey, if I manage this property for you, would you just go ahead and sell it to me instead of just renting it out? And so those are different techniques. It's kind of like a toolbox you take, and financing is like every financing tool you use is just a different way to buy properties. FHA, conventional loans, private loans, seller financing. These are all terms you can learn and study. But in 2023, those are the most important things, because you don't want to just have one tool. You just don't want to go there with a hammer and that's the only tool you have to buy a property. You got to have the whole toolbox, and then that'll open up a lot of options for you so that you can buy properties and sort of weather the storm. Whether I don't have a crystal ball whether we're going to have a recession or not, but we're going to have a recession eventually. We all know that. And so you just need to be prepared for it.
And so the first thing you told us was, man, the location is important. So like, what are some tips on evaluating a location? Like, for example, I mean, we live in the Chicago area, but Chicago's huge. I don't know everything about every neighborhood and every street and every block. So like if I see a house on the MLS or whatever, and I see the address, even if I drive over there, I don't know if I'm going to get a clear enough picture. What are some ways that you go about evaluating a location to see if it's even worth looking further into?
Yeah, you start kind of the higher level. So like let's use Chicago as an example. You want to start on the regional level. It's almost like you're looking on Google Maps. You want to zoom all the way out to, like they call it, a metropolitan statistical area. And you just want to ask yourself just a simple question, like, is Chicago going to be a good economy over the next 10 to 15 years? The answer is yes. Like, Chicago's a massive economy. Like, things are going to be fine. But you're going to do a little homework on that. But then you're going to zoom in, like press that zoom in on the Google Maps, and you're going to start looking for neighborhoods. And when you're first starting, like, you only need one property. So just get really, really small. Get on like the street by street level. If you're in an urban area, get on the block by block level. And actually, I say actually get out the car and walk around. Like, I think that's the best way to kind of get a vibe of a place. And so many people go from their computer and they hear stories. Oh, that area's got crime or this, that. But like, no, get out and talk to people. Talk to people who live there, see what it's like there. And I had a mentor early in my career. He said you always look for things called like emotional subjective criteria. He called it romance. Like, you actually look for romance when you go on the street. Now, what does romance mean? Well, it means different things in different neighborhoods. Sometimes it means like, hey, does this street have like big, tall trees? And is it kind of, it has nice sidewalks? Or does this street, it's kind of close to a coffee shop and like people like to go there? Or this little neighborhood is right near a park. People like to go on the weekends and spend time in the park. So there's different reasons. You got to think about, like, why would somebody want to live in this neighborhood? What's emotionally attractive about it? And if you can figure that out, that's what your that's going to help you rent that property out. And so it's kind of a subjective thing, but it goes back to just being a real person. Like, go out and shop that neighborhood just like a tenant would, just like a buyer would, and say, is this a good place to live? Like, I know maybe I wouldn't live there, but maybe I'm living in a more expensive neighborhood right now, but is this a place where at some point in my life I would have lived there and been happy living there? And if you can answer yes to that question, that's probably got a good potential for being a neighborhood that you can invest in. And so from there, you then get into some of the numbers. You might start saying, all right, here are the prices of the properties. Here's the rent. I want to make sure, for example, there's a real rough rule of thumb. This isn't a perfect rule of thumb, but like something called the 1% rule is a rule of thumb that if you can find a property, for example, you can buy for $200,000 and it could rent for $2,000 per month. $2,000 per month is 1% of the price you're paying for that property. Now, that's hard to do today. Like, the prices have gone up a lot, but if you could find, like, I just bought a house this year in Clemson. We paid $200,000 for it. The rent is about $1,700, $1,800 per month, and the property is probably worth $250. So you can kind of see how it's not exactly the 1% rule, but it's kind of close. And so that's not the final math you want to do, but it's just a rough rule of thumb. If you could start looking at neighborhoods and saying, all right, properties are worth 250. I bet I could find a deal for 200. The rents are like 1,800 bucks per month. You're probably in the right range there. If you're in a big city, it's going to be a little harder. San Francisco, you can buy properties for $1,000,000 that rent for $2,500. So like, it depends on where you are. You have to play a different game in San Francisco than you do in Clemson, South Carolina, where I live. You got to know, you have to adjust your numbers a little bit. You have to adjust your goals a little bit, but that's the general way that you evaluate a neighborhood.
How would you coach someone in the sense of trying to save up some money for an endeavor? Because, you think about things like closing costs, down payment, and rehab that might be necessary to get the property in the position for it to be rented. So if someone's listening, like, man, I need to take this more serious. Maybe I need to start saving toward this goal. What are some things you would have them consider in trying to figure out how much they need to save?
Yeah. So let's work it backwards from the kind of loan you're going to get. So let's go with an example I mentioned earlier. Like you're going to move into a house and do like a house hack where you find a house that has a garage apartment you're going to rent out, or you find a duplex apartment, or maybe you just find a house that you're going to live in for a few years and then eventually keep it as a rental. The good thing about that is you can get like a owner occupied loan. And so I would say, like, what kind of down payment does a loan like that have? And so typically it's going to be 3.5% to 10% down on an owner occupant loan. So you might want to like kind of estimate on the high side. Say, all right, well, best case 3.5% down. If I'm having to pay, you start looking around your neighborhood. Say, all right, I'm gonna have to pay $300,000 for a house around my neighborhood. 3.5%. That's going to be like $7,000-8,000 bucks. Plus closing costs might be 1 or 2% of the purchase price. Just depends on where you are. That's going to be another, $4,000 or so. So you can see, like, just rough math, you're already like, even the minimum, you're like at a $10,000 to $12,000 kind of cash that you need to put in to a property without talking about repairs. So I would say, like, at a minimum level, most houses, 10 to 20,000 bucks is kind of a minimum number, even in like a lower kind of cost area. If you're getting into, again, San Francisco, New York, places like that, just multiply that times 5 or 10 maybe. But the question is, like, all right, well, I don't have that much money. I got 5,000 bucks in the bank, 10,000 bucks in the bank. This is where you have to get creative a little bit. And some people, one of the ways I've seen people, if you happen to be already in a house that has some equity, I've seen a lot of people have success on their first deal or two, maybe using a home equity line of credit if they're comfortable. Now, I know this is kind of like, hey, if you can't sleep well at night having a line of credit on your house, by all means, don't do it. Like, that's not, but I've seen some people get a home equity line of credit because maybe they owed 150,000 on their house and their house is worth 300,000 bucks. And so they might be able to get a home equity line to get maybe 100,000 bucks or 50,000 bucks that they can use almost like a checkbook to kind of help them out with that first rental property deal. They can use that extra cash. Now that's borrowing money, so it's still a risk, right? You're still taking a risk. You still got to make payments on that money, so you want to be really careful with that. But what I found is, like, this, being a real estate entrepreneur being a real estate investor is a lot like being an entrepreneur. Like, you're starting a new business, and man, when you're starting off, you got to be scrappy. Like, you gotta figure out, like, how to get the first deal done. You got to figure out where the cash is coming from. Like, I had to borrow money from other people. I had to partner with people. Like, don't be ashamed. Like, your first 2 or 3 deals, like, you just got to figure it out. Don't be afraid to, like, bring somebody else into the deal with you. Don't be afraid to, like, do something creative, because that's just how you get started. Like, and if you don't, I know particularly I have a lot of students who say, hey, my family doesn't have a lot of money. Like, I can't go borrow money from mom and dad. I can't go borrow money from my friends. Like, you have to be even more scrappy. Like, that's an obstacle, right? But the more determined you are and the more creative you are, you got to go hang out with people who do have that money. And I like going to, like, networking events that other real estate investors are at, hang out, like, they have real estate educational events. What you'll find is there'll be these people, these quiet people in the back of the room who aren't saying much, who've been in real estate for 20, 30 years. They're kind of like the silent money. Those people have money. They're looking for people like you. I'm saying you, the people listening to this, who are honest, who are hardworking, but who don't have the money, and they'll partner with you. They'll put up the money if you bring the deal. And that's how I got my first 2 deals done. There was a guy named Dr. Stone. He was a professor at Clemson. I went back and took some classes with Dr. Stone, and I said, I don't have any money. If I find a good deal, would you partner with me? Would you put the money up? And he did. He put the money up. We split the profits on the deal. And I was off to the races from there because I got confidence and I learned how to do it. And I don't care. I would have given him 99% of the deal if I had to, because I didn't have a deal yet and I just had to get started. And that's sort of the attitude you have to take early in your career. You just gotta get some momentum. You're going to learn so much when you do those first couple of deals. Your knowledge is going to compound, your money's going to compound, but it's hard doing that first one or two. You just got to get your foot in the door.
How do you find like these networking events or meetups where there's other people that are interested in real estate investing?
Yeah, I would, like if I'm Chicago, I'd Google real estate meetup Chicago. You'll probably find like 5 or 10 Facebook groups like that you can just kind of join those. You can also go to Bigger Pockets, the publisher of my book. They're a really good resource, and just check out. They have they have forums there, old school forums, and you can look at the local forums where you can say, where are all the real estate investors in Chicago? Where are all the real estate investors in Atlanta? And you'll just start talking to people and say, hey, where are you guys meeting up? Are you talking? You going out to coffee this week? People who do real estate love hanging out and talking because it's kind of a lonely business. You're out there buying properties and renting these out. You need to talk to other people, and so there's tons of those. Until you start looking for them, you won't realize it. But I joined one when I was a brand new investor. I was in Greenville, South Carolina. Clemson's kind of near Greenville, and it was a local real estate investment association. And they're a nonprofit, and their purpose was to educate people and to provide networking opportunities. And you'll find in most big cities, there's at least 2 or 3 of those there. And then there's just a bunch of informal meetups, and Bigger Pockets organizes those a lot informally. And so you gotta go put yourself out there. If you're somebody who doesn't like talking, and I was kind of introverted early on in my career. I just had to put myself out there and just talk to people and learn. And the way my attitude was, I'm brand new. Like, I don't have much to offer, but I can be sincere and I can ask questions and I can be a learner. I can be a student. And I found like that humility and that honesty to the more experienced investors. They're like, hey, look at this person. They're honest. They don't know everything, but they're really sincere and they want to learn. Yeah, I'd like to help them out. I'd like to listen. And you'll find people to be very generous, I think, if you kind of take that attitude and talk to people.
Now, you've done a bunch of deals via partnerships. So what's your advice on kind of protecting yourself or structuring properly or conversing in a way that everybody's on the same page and there's no issues and no problems, where we're going to get this deal done and we're all going to win as a result?
Yeah. You probably have heard stories. You've heard stories of partnerships gone bad, right? Or maybe you've had some experience with that. But partnerships are kind of like marriage. Like, you want to be slow to get into them. Like, you want to really vet the person out, make sure you have a fit. A fit value wise, a fit with your long term goals. But that being said, once you think that's the case, you can do it. You can kind of test it out in real estate. And so there's a few different structures. Like, the simplest way, if I could do it, if I could have plan A, would just be to let the person who has the money loan you the money. Just let them be the bank. That's the simplest way to do it. I'll just give you an example. Dr. Stone, the guy who was my first partner, the first couple of deals, we just partnered together, and I'll tell you how we did it in a second. But eventually I was like, that's pretty complicated. Like, how about you just loan us the money and we'll pay you an interest rate? And that was so much simpler because my role was being the property owner. His role was being the lender. And instead of me going to the bank and getting the money, I just went to Dr. Stone and he loaned the money. And how does that work mechanically? Like, when we went to the closing and had the attorney or the title company, I was the one who got the deed. I got the title to the property. He got what's called a mortgage, or in some cases it states as a deed of trust. And so he had the security that if I didn't pay him back, he could foreclose on me and take the whole property back. So it's just like a bank, right? But that's simpler because then everybody knows their role. I'm paying him interest every month, and I had to pay him 10% interest up front. I had to pay him a really high interest rate, but over time, as I built trust, I ended up paying him 6% interest, in some cases 5% interest. So as you build trust with somebody, that can get a little bit better, and that's why is that good for him? I paid his grocery money when he retired. Like, he had as a retired professor, retired real estate investor. Like, the money I paid him every month, he didn't do any work for. I did all the work. I did all the collection of rent. I did all the maintenance, the fixing up. All he did was get a check every month, which paid for his groceries, which paid for his lifestyle. And that was nice. He's thanked me for that since then. And I've thanked him. And so that's kind of a plan A. Plan B, though, is that you might have a partner, let's say somebody who has enough money for a down payment, but they don't have they can't come up with $200,000 or $300,000. They don't have that much money. So then you could do a partnership where maybe they go out and buy the property. So let's say my friend Joe, he has the money, he has some credit. I say, hey Joe, like you go buy this property, and then I'm going to stay in the deal. I'm the entrepreneur. I found the deal, but I'm going to lease the property back from you. So I'm going to do what's called a lease with an option to buy. And I'm probably kind of people. I don't want to lose people here because I'm getting a little creative and a little bit. This think about the roles here. Like my friend Joe, he's buying the property. He's the owner of the property. He's on the title. He went and got a loan. I'm the guy who didn't have any money. Like I don't have any money to buy this deal, and so what I'm doing is I'm controlling the property with a contract. And most people have heard of a lease. Well, you can use a lease to control the property, but it's a little bit different. It's called a master lease, where I actually have the right to sublease the property out. So I'm paying Joe like $1,000 per month, and then I'm going and renting it out for like $1,400 per month to my tenant, and I get to keep the difference between $1,000 a month and $1,400 per month. And I had very little very little cash that I put into the deal. So that's a huge benefit. This is, again, if you don't have a lot of money, you can use these creative strategies. This is one I would use in 2023, for example, using lease options, using seller financing, and I can control the cash flow of that property. Then I can also use another contract called an option to purchase the property to control the price of the property as well. And I did that a lot early in my career when I didn't have a lot of capital, didn't have a lot of down payments. But what's the cost of that? The cost is your education. Like you got to study that a little bit. You're not going to learn how to do that overnight. You might have listened to me like, I don't know what Chad was talking about, lease options and subleases and all that stuff.
I need to get the book.
Yeah.
It's in the book. He put it in there. He got formulas in there. He got all type of ideas and strategies. Small and mighty real estate investor, get the book. One thing you kept saying, well, you said multiple times, is seller investing. Now that's something that's new to me. So how in the world do I find a situation where seller financing? How do I scope out a situation where seller financing might be an option for me? How do I even find that type of situation?
Yeah. So most sellers are not going to be willing to seller finance. So I'll say that up front. But there's a segment of the population. And what I found is people who are landlords who already owned a property for a long time. Think about what their situation is. They've been getting rent every single month. In fact, they probably like getting rent. They like that monthly check. They get used to that check. But here's the problem. Eventually, people might own the property for 30 years, especially if they don't manage it that well. They kind of slum out the property a little bit. They don't fix it up, and their tenants get a little bit worse, and they can't attract the best tenants because they're always never fixing anything. Well, if you could find those landlords who are kind of burnt out, who are tired of being a landlord, they like the rent payment. They just don't want to manage that property anymore. They don't want to deal with the hassle. So that's the person that I've been able to work with a lot to buy with seller financing. And I'll give you a real quick example. I bought a house in 2009 from someone. He'd owned the property for 25 years. He was in his early 80s. The property had termite damage. I mean, it was under rented. The property needed a bunch of work. I had to spend $40,000 worth of repairs on that house. But his response to me was, I just don't want to fool with this property anymore. I'm done with it. And so that was like music to my ears. I said, all right, that could be seller financing, because he liked the money. He liked the cash flow, but I made him several offers, and one of my offers was just cashing him out, but it was lower than what he wanted. It was like $80,000. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I made him another offer. He was stuck on the price at $120,000 or $125,000, but I made him an offer with a small down payment, like $4,000 down. And my payment to him was the first year, $200 per month, the second year, $300 per month, and then the fourth year, $400 per month. And 100% of my payment went towards the principal of the property, of the loan. So it was a 0% loan. So I paid him his price. I said, I'll pay you 125, but like, I'm paying you full price. Like, I'm going to put $40,000 in this property. This property is not worth that much. And so I still own that property, by the way. That $125,000 loan or $120,000 seller financing is now like $50,000 or $55,000. And that property that was worth like $150,000, $160,000 in 2009 is now worth $250,000, $260,000. And so I owe 50 or 60. I have $260,000 value. I have a $200,000 wealth that I built in that property, starting with about $45,000. And the way I did the deal, though, was no banks at all. It was 100% talking to that seller, working with that seller, negotiating with that seller. And those people are out there. I know it doesn't seem like it if you're looking at properties on the MLS and making offers through realtors. That's not your typical deal. but they're out there if you're willing to go search for them and talk to sellers.
Now, if I want to be a small and mighty investor, are you telling me I need to be looking for single families or multi units or a mixture?
Both. Yeah, I think it depends on your market. So I'll give you my example. I'm in Clemson, South Carolina. It's a college town. I've got houses, got small mobile homes, and then I've got small multifamily properties like duplexes, fourplexes, I have a 10plex as well. So I've gotten a little bigger. I'm like on the big side of small and mighty. But I have a business partner, a 50-50 business partner. So he owns half of the business. I own half of the business. But together we own like a mix of properties. I've seen some people though, if you're in a suburban like Atlanta, for example, they got tons of single family houses. Like that's all they got, right? So you want to look more towards houses. If you're in an older neighborhood or an older city, Chicago's got some amazing multi-unit properties, kind of up and down, duplexes or fourplexes. St. Louis, Missouri's got a lot of that. So any cities that have older housing stock typically have some really nice small multifamily properties. But the point is, like, you got to start with wherever you are. Like, if you're buying a 10-unit multifamily property when you're a brand new investor, it's probably a little bit of a stretch, right? So start with something small. You don't have to get into multifamily to make it rich. You don't have to. Like, that's part of what I'm trying to push back against. I have one of my mentors, a guy named John Schaub down in Sarasota, Florida. He owns just single family houses, and he's been doing it for 55 years. He's happy. He manages his own properties. It's very simple. You do not have to get into the big multifamily game to make it big. In fact, sometimes it's better just to keep it simple. And so you just have to figure out what works in your market and then start there.
One of your coaching tips is that you want people to evaluate 100 deals to find one. So talk to us about how to do that. Like, how do we even, am I going to realtor.com? Am I like, where am I going? And like, what do you want me to do to evaluate these 100 properties? Because I want to listen
Yeah.
to you, coach. You're Coach Carson for a reason. So you're telling me to do it, but how do I do it?
Yeah. So this is kind of like if I were coaching you in an Olympic sport, or I play football. So let me coach you in football a little bit. You got to put in the reps. You can't just go out there, run on the field and be like the water boy in that movie and just get crushed. You got to actually put in the reps. And so as a real estate investor, you got to put in the reps. And the 100 property rule is sort of like me studying the market and learning the numbers. That's really what it's all about. So I don't care where you go. I would go to Zillow or Redfin, something like that, just because it's so easy, it's so user friendly. But here's what I would do. Like, one of the most important concepts I learned as a real estate investor that I wrote a lot about in the book as well is you need to build what's called a buy box. A buy box. A buy box just means you can't look at everything in town. Like, you can't look at single family houses in 6 different zip codes. You got to say, I'm in this zip code. I'm looking at single family houses. I'm looking at brick 3-bedroom, 2-bath, or brick 1,500 square foot single family houses, and I want them in this zip code, and I want them in the $200,000 to $250,000 or $200,000 to $300,000 price range. See how I've kind of narrowed that down? In Zillow, you can just put in those criteria: 200 to 300, 1,500 square foot. Maybe you put a range on there, 15 to 1,800 square foot. But the point is, like, that'll get rid of like thousands of properties. And now what you're going to do is I want you to look at 100 properties. And actually, if you can, go out and look at them, like drive by those properties. And you're going to see, all right, this house is listed for 225. This house is listed for 275. This house is listed for 250. And I want you to read the description. I want you to take some notes. Like, this is like all the rest of them are listed for 250. This one's listed for 201. Like, why is this one less? Is it because it's smaller property? Is it because it needs some work? Like, read the description on there. And I don't have an agenda. Like, you don't need to, there's no particular thing you need to learn. But if you do that 100 times, if you put this on your phone, print them out if you're old school, whatever you want to do, make a list of 100 properties, go ride by them and look at them. You will learn like a college education on the value of properties in your market. Because by the end of that, what I'm betting is if I showed up there tomorrow and you had done that exercise, I would ride around beside you and I would say, hey, like, is this house is listed for 200. Is that a good deal or is that a okay deal? You would be able to tell me after looking at 100 whether that's on the low end, the high end, whether that's normal. And that's such a valuable trait. That's like doing your reps. That's you doing the weightlifting of real estate investing. Because when the real deal comes along, you get a deal at $180,000 and you're like, ooh, $180,000. That's a steal of a deal. Let me move on that right now, because a good deal in real estate, you got to move fast. You can't wait for a week. It'll be gone in an hour. You got to jump on it right now.
Do you have, as part of your criteria, Do you like certain amount of bedrooms and bathrooms, or is it kind of just varies for you? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, single family house, a 3 or 4 bedroom is probably the best most cases. Especially, it depends on if you're in a suburban area or like a more urban. Like if you're in Manhattan, New York, you're in an apartment, a condo, you just take what you can get. Like people live in closets, right? I mean, it's like so a 1 bedroom or a studio is going to be cool. But if like a general rule, if you ask most people would like to live in a house. Even if they live in an apartment, they want a house. They like a yard. They like, even if there's only 2 people live there, even one person, they wouldn't mind having an extra bedroom for a guest. They wouldn't mind having an extra bedroom for their office. So like having a 3 bedroom house with a 2 car garage is just sort of like the prototypical thing that most people are looking for. Because and as a landlord, I like it because if I rented it out, there's plenty of storage for my tenant. They can put all their stuff in the garage. They tend to stay there longer. And for me, a successful relationship is a happy tenant, like somebody who likes living there, who stays there for 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, 15 years. Like that would be amazing if we could have a good long-term relationship with the tenant. And that's kind of what people don't know when they, kind of bash the landlord tenant thing. It's like landlords serve their tenant, right? They provide a service. They provide a house that has everything works, that's safe, that's in a good location. Often it's an affordable house compared to like buying the house in many cases. And so it's a service, right? And so if you serve your tenant, they'll take care of you. They'll take care of the house. They'll stay there a long time. And so I look for something my tenant would want. And that's why it just depends on where you are. I work it backwards from who my ideal tenant is and then say, what would they want? And let me find that. And so houses are great. But in my market, for example, I rent to a lot of grad students and people who are like kind of upper level students at Clemson University. And I like 1 bedroom and studio apartments because a lot of them don't want roommates. They don't want the hassle of dealing with a roommate. They're past all the partying. They're past all that stuff. They just want to study. They want to go to school. They want to be on the bus line. They want to be walkable to campus. So I work that backwards and say, all right, that's what my tenant wants. Let me buy a property that fits those criteria that literally matches what my tenant wants.
Now, everybody comes to you because in their mind, they want to become real estate investors. You coached a whole lot of people over the years. What's the difference between those who become small and mighty investors and those who don't?
After being in this 21 years, I think a lot of it's persistence. Persistence is tough. Like we're in an instant gratification culture where we want it right now. We want profits right now. We want cash flow right now. But anything good in life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a healthy body, whether it's, your own like spiritual journey, like all of that stuff takes time. And if you're not patient, then it's going to be tough. Like you're not going to get results in real estate in the next 2 to 3 years. You're going to be actually putting money into the property for the next 2 to 3 years. But if you can wait 5 years, 10 years, after 10 years, I tell people I'm still amazed that in the United States where we are right now, if you start from scratch and you work really hard and buy just a few properties, like one property a year for the next 5 to 10 years, in 10 to 15 years from now, you could be financially independent. You could have $1 million. You could have a couple $1 million. And that blows me away because, the average person who gets to retirement age, they don't have that much money. Like people are hurting, people are challenged. We all know that, right? But that gives me a lot of satisfaction to know that, hey, like it's not going to be easy, but 10 to 15 years from now, you could be in a totally different place with a really simple plan. This isn't complicated. I remember addition and subtraction math, not fancy properties, not a lot of properties. You just got to stick to a plan for 10 or 15 years. And that persistence is really the difference. That's the hard part psychologically that we got to get our head around.
Are you going to teach your kids how to invest in real estate? What's the legacy play for you?
Yeah. We've been playing a lot of the Rich Dad Poor Dad cash flow game. I don't know, you ever played that game?
I haven't played it. I heard of it, but haven't done it.
Yeah, I have kind of mixed feelings sometimes about the Rich Dad Poor Dad stuff, but the cash flow game is for real. Like if you want to invest in real estate, in fact, not just your kids, like if any of you want to learn real estate, that game is so realistic on how things work. Like single family houses are good investments, but they don't make you a lot of cash flow. Little fourplexes make more cash flow, but they don't make as much appreciation. I mean, all the factors there are so real. And so I played that game with my kids and they kind of get it now. Like it didn't take them long. Like I was amazed. They're like, one time we pulled a card and my daughter it was like, congratulations, you can go get a CD at the bank and the CD pays you 2%. And my daughter was like, Dad, like, why would I put my money in a bank and get 2%? And I was like, exactly. You're right. Like that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And it just kind of blew me away. I'm like, yeah, like she got it. She got it that I can make more money doing these, investing in real estate, investing in index funds and stocks. And so I think, I don't know, you never know. You can only do so much with your kids, right? You do your best. But I think I've told them, like, my kids are very creative and they're very artistic and musical. They like, one plays violin, the other plays piano. They're very creative. And I said, look, you got to follow your heart, do what how you want to contribute to the world and use your talents. But at the same time, you got to learn to take care of yourself financially. And that might mean buying a couple of properties. That might mean having some skills on the side that you work a side hustle. Like I've been trying to make sure that, hey, you got to take care of yourself out there. There's nobody else going to take care of you. But most of all, I'm just trying to do that with example, like them. So I try to talk about it. I try to show them what I do in business. I'm trying to be an open book to them. When they come down in the office and I'm down here working, like, hey, you want to see what I'm working on? This is me doing the bookkeeping, and this be an open book, and they kind of soak it all up anyway. And they always watch what we do more than what I say anyway, right?
100%. So tell everybody a little bit more about what they will find when they go and get their copy of your new book, Small and Mighty Investor.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, and it's an honor to be on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And the book is called The Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor. It's on everywhere that you can buy books. It's on Amazon. You can listen to it on Audible if that's your thing. Bigger Pockets is my publisher, and if you go through Bigger Pockets, there's actually some pretty cool bonuses that I made. One of those bonuses, I had a bonus chapter called How to Be a Small and Mighty Investor in a Changing Economy. So if you want to kind of get more depth on how do you buy properties with high interest rates, how do you buy them when the prices seem really high compared to what I thought they were in the past, like that's the chapter that talks about that. And then I also have another bonus called the 2-hour real estate work week. And I've been telling people the last couple of years, like, I work 2 hours per week on my real estate. And they're like, I don't believe that. Give me a break. And so I was like, all right, let me show you how I spend my week. And so I have this agenda showing like what my week looks like, and it's kind of color coded. And then I have an exercise that helps people reading it say, hey, what do you want your week to look like? Because this is really why we're investing. We're investing for time. We're not investing for money. We're trading this money that we build up so that we can have free time to do what matters, to actually spend our time, invest our time on the things that are really important to us. And so there's an exercise there to help you kind of work it backwards and make your own schedule, and then build that as a small and mighty investor.
Awesome. We'll be sure to have a link to all of that in the show notes of this episode. I know people want to keep in touch with you, so tell everybody about your podcast and all the things you got going on personally on the internet.
Yeah, if you want to stay in touch with me, look up Coach Carson on YouTube. I do a lot of YouTube videos. All my podcasts are on YouTube every Monday. So I drop a new episode. And my podcasts are really conversational. Sometimes they're conversations with other real estate investors, very tactical about what they're doing. I go deep on deals and how do you analyze them? How do you run the numbers? And then I have some episodes just with me, where it's just me for 30 minutes chatting it up. So, for example, I had a recent episode talking about how do you actually, if you get to the stage where you want to pay the debt off on your rental properties, how to use what's called a rental debt snowball. And so I went into like the numbers and how it works. So I love the tactics. I'm the coach. I like to get the whiteboard out and draw the plays on the whiteboard. That's kind of my style. So if that resonates with you, I would be honored to have any of you listen and check me out. Just search for Coach Carson on any platform, podcasting platform, YouTube, and I'll be there.
Thank you so much, Chad, for taking time out of your busy schedule to share all of this great insight with us today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another edition of the His and Her Money Show is complete. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you took good notes, and I hope you share this because your people, they need to know about this as well. We want as many people to win financially and in every other way as possible. So help us to accomplish our mission by sharing this with your friends and your family. Remember, you can find a ton of content just like this to equip you on your journey to taking dominion over your money and your life over at our website, hisandhermoney.com. That's all we got for this time, guys. It's been great. Until next time, peace.